Hebrews chapter 13, 12 through 14. We're just going to receive this word with this title of the sermon. So let us go outside of the camp. I want you guys to repeat after me. Let us go outside the camp. One more time. Let us go outside the camp. Today is a mission Sunday. Brothers and sisters, the Cross Church, we like the word the missions. When we hear the mission reports, our heart is very encouraged. When the missionaries share the story from the field, we are moved. And when we hear about the gospel message and the gospel of the Jesus Christ is being preached in the distant land, and that somebody else has received the Christ, that's going to be a very, very joyful moment. We're also thankful when we give the mission offerings, because we feel that even if we cannot go ourselves, we still participate in the work of the God's kingdom. Churches are also like to describe themselves the mission-minded, mission-oriented, missional churches. That's why we would like to say that we are the church for the missions, the church that supports the mission, church that sends the missionaries. But today, I want to just carefully think honestly about the one thing. Therefore, is the difference between the supporting missions and participating in the missions. Is there any differences between the supporting missions and the participating in missions? When we support the missions, from the safety places, we can clap for the missions from the comfortable zones. And we can move by the mission stories while sitting inside of the church building. And even prayer and giving is important that as we are, can sometimes, be done without our living being deeply disrupted. Of course, so I'm not saying the prayer and giving are unimportant, by the way. They are absolutely necessary because, missions cannot continue without the prayer. Missionaries cannot endure without the support. But today's passage asks us a deeper question of the spirituality. Are we really going to the place where Jesus is? Are we merely watching the missions, or are we participating in the missions? And then lastly, we just want to ask ourselves, are we staying inside of the camp, or are we going outside of the camp of Jesus Christ? Today is a Mission Sunday. As we just described, today is a very important day of the missions, by the way. We are also participating to the recognize and support the missionaries partnership and committed ourselves again to the missions of the gospel. But more than making it the program or some of the events, we need to stand before the spiritual question of this question. Am I staying inside of the camp, or am I going to Jesus outside of the camp? Why do we hesitate to participate in missions, by the way? There are many, reasons, but often it is because of our fear. We're sometimes afraid of the discomfortable, zone and comfortable, situation. And we are afraid of the living what is the familiar. We are afraid of the losing control. That we wonder if I get hurt, if I take too much time on that, if it costs too much, if the peaceful, rhythm of my life is disrupted, how can I just control and how can I just deal with, this mission, by the way? But Hebrews chapter 13, today's passage shows us the gospel reality that is deeper than our fear. So we often think that, camp is safe. The camp is familiar. The camp is comfortable. Camp is where we are surrounded by the people. We know the situation we can control. But this passage, shows us a different direction, by the way. Where is Jesus in this passage? He's not inside of the gate. He suffered outside of the gate. Then the author of the Hebrews says, therefore let us go to him outside of the camp. So today, from the passage, Hebrews chapter 13, 12 through 14, we're just gonna see the three truths of the essence of the mission. First thing is we're just gonna deal with what Jesus has done, and second thing is this: what we must do, And then lastly, why, the reason we can do that. So we're going to navigate into today's passage in Hebrews chapter 13, the 12 through 14. Three aspects is we are going to deal with and study about the essence of the mission. First thing, Jesus first went outside of the gate. I want you guys to repeat after me. Jesus first went outside the gate. Let us just look at the verse 12, it says. So Jesus also suffered outside of the gate in order to sanctify the church, sanctify the people through his own blood. The author of the Hebrews, emphasized the place where Jesus suffered. Where did Jesus suffer? He suffered where? Outside of the camp. The author could have simply said it. Jesus suffered. Jesus, have a difficult times on that. But he added the phrase that outside of the gate. Why is it happening? This is not just the geographical details. It is the theological statement. It tells us what the death of the Jesus Christ this means. If you understand it, if you want to, in order to understand the verse 12, we need to look at the verse right before it. So I want you guys to check it out, verse 11. I'm just going to read it for you guys. For the bodies of those animals, those blood is brought into the holy places by the high priests as sacrifice for sin are burnt outside the camp. You know what? Context of this verse 11. In the Old Testament, the sacrificial system, the blood of the animals were brought into the holy place by high priests, but that after taking up from the animals, the animals, blood, and the body of the animals were burnt outside of the camp. Then the verse 12 says, so Jesus also. If you look at the point of the so Jesus also. What does that mean by that? The word, so Jesus also. The connection is very clear and important. That the outside of the camp in verse 11 points to the place or outside of the camp of the Israelites in the wilderness. And then also verse 12, the outside of the gate, points to the place outside of the gate of Jerusalem where Jesus suffered. The author of the Hebrews actually connected to, verse 11 and 12, these two realities. Just as the body of the sacrifice was taken outside of the camp, did Jesus suffer outside of the gates in order to sanctify his people through his own blood. The word outside matters. If you look at over and over again, there is outside and outside and outside. The Hebrews actually pointing at the emphatic point is outside. Outside of the camp was not the center of the community. It was not a place of the honor, protection, or exception. And it was the place where it was considered the unclean and shameful and rejected was taken. It was the place of the shame and exclusive, places. But if you look at, verse, Jesus went to there. Jesus went the outside of the gate. The cross was not originally the beautiful decoration, by the way. Sometimes you guys probably have to think about some of the image about the cross of the Jesus Christ. It's kind of a beautiful image. Sometimes we can see that. You have rings and also necklace, or sometimes, Christianity is a beautiful, decoration of the cross. You imagine on that. But actually, it was not that beautiful. It's dirty, nasty. That is more like, it is very, very violated, unclean and shameful and rejected all the time. And there is a place of the shame. It was the place of the rejection. It was the place of the bloody execution. But yet Jesus shed his blood there outside of the gate. Why? Verse 12 tells, the reason. In order to sanctify the people. To sanctify means, more than simply making somebody else morally clean. It means to set apart for God. It means to make somebody belong to God. And Jesus suffered outside of the gates, so that the sinners under the shame that could become a people of God who belongs to God. This is the paradox of the gospel, by the way. In the eyes of the people, cross looked like a place of the failure. It looks like, place of the curse. It looks like a place of the abandonment. But the eyes of the God, it is very place to become a, place of the salvation. The place people call the shame become a, place where God made us holy and sanctified over there. The place people call the rejection become a place where God made us His people. Therefore, we must remember where the mission begins. Mission does not begin with our passion. Mission does not begin with our strategy. Mission does not begin with our program. Mission does not even begin with our offering. Mission begins here. Jesus the first went outside of the gates. Before we search for God, Jesus came to seek us. Before we came to God, Jesus went outside for us. Because before, we ever go to the mission field, Jesus first went to the lowest, most shameful place for our salvation. Therefore, Christian mission is not merely a church program. It is not simply afford to expand the name of the church name. No, we don't really do the mission for our name fame. It is not merely humanitarian, the services, the mission is the following the path that Jesus first walked. That's why we walk outside and then we go missions. Jesus went outside the gate. So we go toward those outside of the gate. Because Jesus shed His blood in the place of the shame, we are willing to bear discomfort, sacrifice, reproach for the sake of the gospel. We have to remember. So on the Mission Sundays, the first thing that we need to just remember is not simply shout at let's do the missions. But the first thing that we need to do is to stand before this gospel truth. Jesus went outside the gate for us. We don't naturally belong to God. As we know that, we were sinners under the shame. We could not come to God by ourselves, but Jesus went outside of the gate for us. Through His blood, He sanctified us. He made us the God's people. The person who knows the disgrace can participate in mission. Missions does not begin with the pressures or something, negotiation or some of the deals. It begins with grace of the Jesus Christ. It's not I must do this because I have to, but it is because Jesus first went outside the gate for me. That's why I will follow Him. That's the motivation, and that this is true, of the first essence of the missions. Jesus first went outside of the gate. Second, we also must go out bearing His reproach. I want you guys to look at, verse 13. It says, therefore, let us go to Him outside of the camp and bear the reproach that He endured. Verse 12 tells us what Jesus did for us. Verse 13 tells us how we must respond. Jesus sacrificed outside of the gate. Therefore, we must go to Him outside of the camp. The word therefore, is important. It means that verse 2 and verse 3 cannot be separated, by the way. So because Jesus suffered outside of the gate, we also must go outside of the camp. Because Jesus sanctified us through His blood of the Jesus Christ, we must follow Him. Because He went the place of the shame, we cannot choose, only the faith without shame. This is the logic of the gospel. But notice this, the author does not say, therefore, missionaries should go. Or somebody else's church leader should go. Pastors should go. Or the church leaders should go. He didn't say it like that way. But here is the point of the verse 13. Therefore, let us go. What does that mean by that? This is not only for the specific group of the people. This is not only for those who feel especially prepared. Going outside of the camp is the gospel shaped the direction of all of you guys here. Let us go. Even though you are consider yourself those who are sanctified God, sanctify the people of God, then you are included in these people. Let us go. Even though you're not prepared, even though equipped anymore, but you're feeling like, you are, truly, you are the people of God. You gotta let us go. You are included here, us. Not the specific group of the special people, special group of the people, special committed people, but all the people of God, involved in this mission work. Let us go. To be honest, many of us, something like a logical response to the missions. We do not dislike the missions. We respect missionaries. We believe the mission offerings are necessary. We agree the church must be involved in the missions, right? We agree with that. But when the missions enter into our own life, we suddenly become uncomfortable. We begin to do who is going this time? The mission teams will handle with this. I'm not ready yet, but I don't think, this is my role. Sometimes you guys are rejected and they even hesitate to participate in mission work. We know the missions is good and necessary, but the missions begin to ask our time and our money and our comfort and our participation. Our hearts often step back. We're not against the missions, but we are uncomfortable when the missions touch our lives. We are fine with the support of the mission, but hesitate to participate directly in the missions. We're moved when the missionaries go outside of the camp, but we hesitate when we must take the one step outside of the camp ourselves. But the text meets us at the exact point. Therefore, let us go. No exception. Therefore, let everybody of the sanctified people of God, let us go. It is a necessary command of the gospel. Also, verse 13 does not simply say that let us go outside of the camp, but it says let us go to Him, Jesus Christ, outside of the camp. But what does that mean by that? We are not going outside of the merely to suffer. Discomfortable itself is not a goal. Reproach itself is not the goal. We go outside of the camp because Jesus is over there. We go to Him. We approach to Him. We're trying to meet Jesus Christ and share the Jesus Christ outside of Him. That's why we're doing it. This is crucial. Mission is not simply going to help the poor people. Mission is not simply doing the good work. Mission is not simply giving something to the people who are less than we do. Missions is going to the place where Jesus Christ is. Because there are the people there who need the gospel. People loved by God and the people for whom Christ died. That's why we go outside of the camp. Then the text tells us how we go. I want you guys to just fix your eyes on verse 13. It says, therefore, let us go to Him outside of the camp and bear the reproach that He endured. Reproach is not simply ordinary difficulties. Hebrews chapter 11:26 uses the same idea when it speaks of the Moses. I just read it for you guys. Hebrews chapter 11, 26. He says, considered. Moses considered the reproach of the Christ the greater wealth than the treasure of the Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. The reproach of the Christ means the shame and the comfort that we bear because we belong to Jesus. To bear his reproach is to participate in the way of the Jesus. It is shared in the shame and rejection and cost that come with the Jesus Christ, the gospel. But if you're honest, we afford the faith without reproach. Who enjoyed being the misunderstood, by the way? Who enjoyed being the uncomfortable for the gospel? Who wants the shame, the rejection, and the insult because of the Jesus? Nobody else. But we often want to commitment without cost and a mission without the discomfort, service that does not disrupt our lives too much. But the text pointing out that exactly says, bear the reproach that he endured. There is a reproach on the road to the Jesus outside of the camp. There is the discomfort, and this is the sacrifice. There may be misunderstanding. It may be caused why? Because that is the road Jesus Christ walked. Jesus did not choose the way without the shame. Jesus did not choose the way the comfortable and then also public honorable places. Jesus sacrificed, suffered outside, the gate, inside of the gate, but he actually suffered outside of the gate in the place of people rejecting and displeased. Therefore, if we said we follow Jesus, we cannot always insist on the safety. And if we said we believe in Jesus Christ, we cannot always choose only the path of the comfortable, ways and the approval ways. If the Jesus went outside of the gate, we cannot remain forever inside of the gate and inside of the camp. So passage asks us, where is outside the camp for us? Outside of camp is not just merely the distant country. Of course, the mission field is outside of the camp. But place where the gospel is needed, a place where the people have not heard the name of the Jesus, a place where somebody else must sacrifice to carry the gospel, that's the surely outside of the camp. So many times we face into the outside of the camp, by the way. We're going outside for the evangelism. Especially, we are actually approaching the Cherokee Indians in our short-term mission trip. And sometimes, on the street, you guys are sharing some of the, where next week, we are just sharing of the, ice water to the homeless people on that. All the, any gospel work, any of the, you guys are sacrificing for the gospel, that is going to be outside of the camp. The person who you haven't been afraid to speak about the gospel in a place where we are passionate on the inside of the church, silent in the word. Relationship we have avoided because it is uncomfortable. Neighbors, the community, our church has not yet reached, boundary our hearts, wants to stay only within the familiar language, culture, and comfortable. The most important question is not simply where is the place. The most important question is this place where I must go to Jesus? Is this place where I must bear his reproach? The Cross Church people, are you watching the missions from the inside of the camp or outside of camp? Are we taking the step toward Jesus outside of camp or inside of camp? You guys stay in the inside of the camp. Jesus has already gone outside of the gate. And today, he calls us, let us go to him outside of camp and bear the reproach that he endured. And lastly, those who go outside of camp, I want you guys to repeat after me. Look to the city. Repeat after me. Look to the city that is to come. One more time. Look to the city that is to come. Finally, those who go outside of camp to look to the city that is to come. Let's just look at the verse 14. It says, "For here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come. Verse 13 tells us to go to Jesus, the outside of the camp, the bearing his approach. Verse 14 explains why we can do this. Because the reasoning here, out of the Hebrews 14, it says, for here we have no lasting city. Why do we often hesitate to go outside of the camp? Because we think that we have too many things, too much to lose on our hands. So we fear the losing the comfort, we fear the losing time, we fear the losing the money, we fear the losing the relationship, we fear the losing the stability we have built in our lives. So we try to remain inside of the camp, but we want to stay in the place that is a familiar, manageable, and safe. But the author of the Hebrews speaks to our fear. Here we have the no lasting city. This word does not contain our internal security. The comfort that we are afraid to lose will not be lasting, forever. The success, recognition, and the stability you try to so hard, put on, and then protect will not last forever. Why? Because there is no lasting city in this world. But we do have a city that is coming. And this is city that is to come is the eternal kingdom of God, has prepared for his people. It is the final hope to those, who belongs to Jesus Christ. So the author of the Hebrews actually very, very encouraging the people here. Therefore, what we lose in this world is not the final loss. The reproach that we bear in this world is not the final story. But the discomfort that we endure for the gospel is not the end of our hope. But this is the power for the missions, because we have eschatological hope, hope of the city that is to come. We can bear the reproach, discomfort, and the cost of the going outside of the camp. Mission is not simply an event. Mission is not simply the support. The mission is our direction. That's why we're always longing and then also looking at seeking the city that is to come. It shows where we are looking, reveals what kind of people we are. We are the ultimate security, is in this world. We're staying inside of the camp. But if we seek the city that is to come, we can go outside of the camp today. Therefore, missions is not a temporary emotion. It is not something we do only when we are moved by the report. Missions is the confession of the life. So I will follow Jesus, and my truth city is not here, but up here. There's no lasting city on this earth, but we seek the city that is to come. Therefore, we go to Jesus outside of the camp bearing his reproach. That's the reason we can go outside of the camp. Today's passage speaks clearly. Jesus first went outside of the gate. He suffered in the place of the shame and the rejection in order to sanctify us through his own blood. Therefore, we must go to him outside of the camp, bearing the reproach he endured. And we can do this because here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come. Mission isn't merely a church event. Mission is the direction of our faith. Mission is not simply being moved, then going back to our normal life. But a mission is taking the real step toward Jesus outside of the camp. Today, our church, has the concrete places outside of the camp before us. We will support and serve our missionary partners, the missionary Han right there. And we will participate in the work of the mission throughout the prayer and then also giving. And we will preparing for the Cherokee Native, American, short-term mission trips in Oklahoma from the July 2nd through 5th. And we are continuing to evangelize our neighbors, our community, and share the gospel with them. Some will go with their bodies. Some will go through the prayer. Some will go through the keeping and the serving. But all of us must have a direction toward the outside of the camp. So today, let us ask ourselves, am I staying only in the comfort of the camp? Or am I only supporting the missions from the distance? Am I taking the one step toward Jesus, the outside of the camp? Which way that you are going to take? Jesus has already gone outside of the gate. Now it is our turn to decide and follow our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, outside of the camp. So let us go outside of the camp. Bearing his approach, let us look the city that is to come. And may our church become a church that follows Jesus, proclaim the gospel, and that goes outside of the camp for the sake of his mission, Jesus Christ altogether.